Welcome to Talking Tuesdays with the Starch Queens. Tonight, I have a special privilege. We're starting a new series called Ask the Doctor. So I'm very excited about this. And with us tonight is Dr. David Danaeff, who is an internist specializing in lifestyle medicine. His focus is on the prevention and treatment of chronic diseases through nutrition, fitness, and stress management. He started the Medical Compass MD in Brooklyn and to help people change their health destiny. And if you have not seen the interview that I did with Dr. Jeanne, do check it out. It's on my YouTube channel, because one of his patients was Brooklyn Borough President Eric Adams, who has reversed diabetes and looks amazing. So thank you, Dr. Danaeff. Welcome to the show.
Well, I appreciate being here, and I appreciate you guys inviting me. And this is a wonderful forum. I wanted to open the show with a theme, and then we could go to questions if that's okay.
That's great, because I just want to jump in and talk about our theme tonight is going to be plant versus animal protein, and what's the difference, benefits and harms. That's going to be our main topic that you're going to take off in a minute. And then we've got several questions which are going to be really amazing. So stay tuned for those after we get through. And then you're going to talk about the most current research tonight, and that's going to be about hydration and kidney function. So very exciting, but take it away, Dr. Danaeff, on plant versus animal protein, because I just got the question. I was at a health fair, and I think I had it twice in that the whole day. Where am I going to get my protein? So plant versus animal protein, take it away.
Okay, thank you very much. And I'd like to start by talking about protein and the myths with it. And the first thing is with the myth of protein. When we say protein, we don't say animal protein, we don't say plant protein, we say protein. And we assume, and you know what happens when you assume.
Yes.
But we assume it's animal protein. And we say, well, you can't possibly get enough protein from plants. But is that true, or is that a myth? And the answer is it's a myth, because you have bodybuilders who are plant-based. You have skiers. You have athletes. You have so many different people who have big muscular bodies that are constantly beating themselves up with sports and intense exercise, and yet they're plant-based. So you don't have to be animal-based to have protein. You can get plenty of it. And this came from the idea in World War II, when we weren't getting enough food, when we were rationing food. And so it was very important to get your animal protein. And this all started during World War II. And when we were rationing the food in the United States, because we had our resources involved with the war development. And so moving forward, this is really not true in today's modern world. And so when we look at animal protein versus plant protein, there are definite advantages to using plant protein rather than animal protein. Animal protein tends to cause inflammation. And inflammation tends to be the basis of chronic disease. At least 80+% of chronic diseases come from increased inflammation. So when we look at animal protein, we can say you have increased risk of chronic kidney disease. You have increased risk of kidney stones. You have increased risk of osteoporosis. You have increased risk of inflammation, as I mentioned. You have increased risk of diabetes. Even diabetes, you get an increased risk. You have increased risk of osteoporosis. And the list goes on and on and on. And it's really amazing that animal protein can cause all these chronic diseases related to having too much protein. So let's start with chronic kidney disease. Chronic kidney disease is defined as less than having a GFR, which is glomerular filtration rate, or the functioning of the kidneys, the way we measure it, and less than 60. And people who have less than 60 have chronic kidney disease. They start with stage 3, it goes on to 4, and by 5, you're on end-stage renal disease or kidney disease, which means you're now on dialysis.
Well, do we store protein?
What's that?
Do we store protein?
We don't store protein. We actually don't store much protein. So that's a really good question.
Well, what happens if we eat too much protein?
Well, what happens is when we eat too much protein, it can cause, this is what I mean by, it depends on the protein. So if we use, say, animal protein, if we have too much of it, it can cause an acidic environment in our body, which causes a leaching of calcium out of the bone. So if we use too much of it, then we need calcium to help balance out that acidity. Or if we have, say, for instance, an instance with chronic kidney disease, if you have more animal protein with chronic kidney disease, you decrease the functioning of the kidney. And there have been several studies showing this, but in my clinical experience, I see the GFR, or the functioning of the kidney, go down.
So that's causing incontinence.
Well, what do you mean by incontinence? You mean urinary incontinence?
Yeah.
Not necessarily causing incontinence. No, but it's causing
the kidney out.
Right. It's stressing the kidney out. It's definitely stressing the kidney out. What does that mean? Can it be incontinence? I'm not sure. But I don't know if it demonstrates. The problem with kidney function is that as it gets lower, and when you get to the end stage of kidney function, you actually don't urinate. You actually don't excrete. It's the opposite. So you don't find any functioning with the kidney at the end stage, and that's why you need dialysis, because that's what removes the toxins. You get dialysis twice a week, and dialysis twice a week is not the same thing as how we remove toxins by urinating on a regular basis multiple times a day. So that's what's really dangerous about this.
Wow.
And when you talk about, say, animal protein causing diabetes, for instance, Adventist Health Study 2 that showed that there was a 51% reduction in the case of diabetes in people who ate plant protein versus animal protein. So you can reduce that risk of diabetes by half by reducing the animal protein. Does that mean you shouldn't be eating any animal protein? Well, if you want the best health, reducing the animal protein is great, and reducing it even more to the lowest levels is the best. So if you really want good results, the lower the amount of animal protein you put into your body, the better you're going to do. Does that mean everybody has to be vegan? No, not necessarily. But it means that the more you lower it, the better results you're going to see. And studies have shown as 10%, you can have up to 10%, but then there are other studies that say that if you have none, you do even better. So it depends on what you believe in. But how I work with my patients, and when I talk to my patients, I say, I try to move them to where they want to go. I don't push them to the limit and say, okay, here's no animal protein. Let's start off with no animal protein. I try to reduce the amount of animal protein to about 1 serving a day or 1 serving every other day. And that's where I start. And if we can, we try to wean them down even more. But we want patients to be able to meet their own goals, what they're willing to do, without getting them uncomfortable. And at the same time, get them to optimal health or get them to their goals.
So what are the benefits then of the plant-based proteins?
Well, the benefits of the plant-based proteins are, it's the opposite. You get more, for instance, if you used chronic kidney disease as an example. There's a study from 2016 that shows that when you use plant-based protein, you get, for every 33% increase in the total protein that is plant-based as compared to animal-based. So you're taking every 1/3 increase in plant protein out of the total. So you can increase it 3 times to 100%, right? Technically. Mm-hmm. You get 23% reduction. Every time you increase by 33%, you get 23% reduction in the cause of in mortality. So in death. So a almost a quarter or 25% reduction in death by increasing the total protein, the percent of plant protein, by 1/3. So every time you increase the percent by 1/3, you decrease the risk of death in people with chronic kidney disease by 25%.
Wow.
That's huge.
Wow. Very huge.
So I have to ask the question, do plants have protein?
Plants have plenty of protein, and that is a great question. And what plants have protein? Let me see. dark leafy green vegetables, or fruits, or any vegetables for that matter. But fruits, believe it or not, have protein. Do they have a lot of protein? No, fruits do not have a lot of protein. Where do you get a lot of protein from? You get a lot of protein from vegetables, but you get tremendous amount of protein from beans and legumes. And now they have bean pasta. And in bean pasta, a lot of times you can get in one serving 21 grams of protein.
Wow.
Now, people have always said that the problem with plant protein is it's not complete protein. It doesn't have all the amino acids we need. Is that a problem? Not really if you eat different varieties of plants. So in other words, if you don't just eat beans, but if you eat dark leafy greens, if you eat fruits, if you eat nuts and seeds, if you eat whole grains, you're getting a whole complete amount of protein. So you get it, you just have to eat a variety of foods. And eating a variety of foods is tremendous. Plus, plant protein gives you fiber. And so that's something that animal protein gives you none of. And we know that fiber plays tremendous role. Fiber plays a tremendous role in reducing constipation. It plays a tremendous role in colorectal cancer. In fact, there are studies that show that in the middle of stage 3 colorectal cancer, you can use fiber alongside conventional medicine to reduce the risk of progression of the metastases. Wow. And also to help heal the colorectal cancer. That came out just recently as fiber as one of the now becoming a conventional medicine therapy to treat colorectal cancer. So fiber is just, I mean, it's a tremendous factor. And plants have fiber. And all plants that have fiber have protein. And
so Grandma was right. Eat your fruits and vegetables.
Yes, she was.
Grandmas are always right.
So when you think of the fiber, when you think of it, it's really not where's the beef, but where's the fiber.
You remember that commercial? That little old lady. She was hilarious. She was
about this tall.
I know. Her and her
she was about 900 years old.
Right?
And looking for the beef. Right.
Yeah,
right,
exactly.
Right.
Her and her two little cronies.
Popping out over the big old huge car. I loved all of her her passengers in the car too.
They were all great. That was a great commercial. But it's true. Instead of where's the beef, it's where's the fiber.
Where's the fiber?
Right.
Absolutely.
Right. And there's so many more components to plants that the fiber, the phytonutrients or micronutrients that then come into phytonutrients, which are plant nutrients, and that reduces inflammation, and that helps prevent osteoporosis instead of increasing the risk of osteoporosis, and that helps reduce the risk of colorectal cancer instead of increasing the risk of colorectal cancer. And also there's something called heme iron, which is blood iron, and that comes from red meat. And the more red meat you have, the higher heme iron you have. And heme iron can increase the risk of cardiovascular disease and can increase the risk of diabetes. There is actually a study done, a tremendously wonderful study, leading edge study done by a physician named Caldwell Esselstyn. Do we know who Caldwell Esselstyn is? Do you guys both know who he is?
Essie.
Yes, he goes by Essie.
Read his book and met him.
Okay, and he's in the Cleveland Clinic. He's done great work. He started out by doing a trial and published it in 1998 with 22 patients. And they were coronary artery disease patients or cardiovascular patients or heart disease. Use any of these names. They're all the same, basically.
When he said, I was talking with him at one point, and he said when he first started this trial that they were kind of sicker than he really wanted them to be.
Yeah, what's really interesting is that they had about 40 or 60 events. And when I say events, I mean like heart attacks. So that's about as sick as you can get. And so on average, about each patient had about 3 or 4 events per patient before they started this trial.
Wow.
So yeah, that's just amazing. So what happened is he took these 22 patients. He followed them for 6 years and then continued to follow them for 12 years. And what he found was, out of those patients that continued on the diet, and about 17 of them continued on the diet for those 12 years, none of them over 12 years had one cardiovascular event. None of them. Remember, we started by saying they had 4 cardiovascular events previously per patient. Not one of them over 12 years had any. And this was based on a plant-based approach, and it was plant protein that we're looking at here.
Well, let's go back. Let's just jump back to
Sure.
the heme versus non-heme.
Okay.
Let's talk about that, because I think that needs to be clarified for people, because
Sure.
yeah, that's a big one.
Sure. So foods that have heme are animal proteins, and that includes red meat being the biggest offender, but it also includes dark meat chicken, it also includes dark meat turkey, it also includes pork and lamb. And pork is not the other white meat. It's really more red meat. I mean, you can call it what you want, but it's still red meat. Yeah.
We have a question, Dr. Danae, from Kathy J. Cross. She's asking about the new Incredible Burgers. Have you heard of them? The new
You mean Beyond Meat?
Beyond Meat Impossible Burger.
Mm-hmm.
So she's asking about the protein in that product versus straight from the plant.
Okay.
Is it still considered a clean protein with it being so processed, is what I'm going to gather her question to be.
Well, I think you just, in the title of what you just said, answered the question.
Right.
Yes.
Yes, sorry.
Well, no, that's fine. I think that's great. And what you gathered is correct. It does have protein,
right,
but it loses all its phytonutrients. And so what you're doing is you're processing out all these phytonutrients, and now you end up with something like pea powder protein. If you were to do pea powder protein, you would get probably the same amount of protein as if you did Beyond Burger. So if you, or Beyond Meat, I don't know exactly what it's called. I'm sorry for not getting the title right. But it's Beyond Meat, or there's a number of different ones.
Yeah, I think they call it the Impossible Burger by Beyond Meat. Yeah.
Right. That's just the product, but the name of the company is Beyond Meat or something like that.
Right.
Right.
And what you find is that you could take powder protein, pea powder protein, and just put it into a shake or put it into a smoothie or put it on a salad or put it on that, and you would get the same protein, but you wouldn't get as much processed. So what happens is you end up with the Beyond Meat and everything else having a lot of carbs and having a lot of processed carbs, and you have a lot of processed product there. So it's almost like textured vegetable protein, TVP as we refer to it. Textured vegetable protein is really a processed meat. Even though it's not a meat, it's a plant protein. It's about as unhealthy as you get in the plant world. So
don't they add a lot of oil and salt and things like that to that?
There's a lot of fat. There's a lot of fat product.
Right. They add too much salt. They add too much fat to the product. They want it to be like a hamburger. I applaud them for that. And if it can get people to reduce the amount of meat, it doesn't mean they have to stop it. We don't know what's the effect, but it would be better if they ate plants directly rather than processed plants. Whole foods. That's why it's whole food plant-based diet, not plant-based diet.
Well, those are kind of transition foods.
Wait, I just have one more comment.
Yeah.
There was a study, and this will come in really handy. There was a study done with heart disease that compared patients who ate meat, and that means all animal products, versus ate plant-based. And what they found, vegan versus meat. And what they found was the meat increased the risk of heart disease, and the vegan decreased the risk of heart disease. However, what they did, they went a step further. They delineated between healthy vegan and unhealthy vegan. And what they found was those that ate a whole foods plant-based diet had even more reduction in heart disease. And those who ate an unhealthy vegan diet had similar results as the meat-eating population. And in fact, the line was slightly above it, not statistically significant, but was slightly above it. So you've got to be very careful when you talk about plants that you're talking about a whole foods plant-based diet and not just a plant-based diet.
That was a great question. So Kathy has a follow-up question, Dr. Danaev. She says,
Sorry, only one question at a time.
One at a time. She says, what about homemade veggie burgers? Is there the same phytonutrient loss as with the Impossible Burger?
Well, it depends on, it's a great question. And it depends on what you're putting in the veggie burger. You can make bean veggie burgers. You can make veggie burgers with greens in them. And you can get quite a bit of benefit from having veggie burgers. So homemade veggie burgers have a lot more benefit than processed veggie burgers.
But you're controlling what's going into it, so you're getting the
correct, and you're using fresh ingredients,
exactly.
And then you're eating it right after or freezing it. You can freeze it and then eat it later, but you're making it and you're doing it as opposed to using processed environment.
All right,
great questions.
These are great questions. So please, I love these questions.
Yeah.
All right.
Protein's always a topic. It's always a topic, and it will continue to because it's still being so over marketed and over commercialized by supplement companies.
Yes.
Right.
So there's the crutch of it.
I see the kids in school with the whey protein. I just want to scream.
I feel bad because those big canisters of protein, they're like $60, $70. So people are mortgaging their house, and their health when they don't need the added protein.
Right. And what's interesting about that, and you really bring up a great point, is that whey protein, and I was using whey protein because I was working out like a fiend and using whey protein, and I'm still working out like a fiend, but I'm not using whey protein anymore because whey protein is animal protein and it creates inflammation, and it creates inflammation that doesn't go away. While you want inflammation after you work out, you want the inflammation to subside as you're done with the workout. So after a day or two, the inflammation should go away. Whereas whey protein, you're putting it in your body. So if you're talking about whey protein or bodybuilding protein for people who want to lift weights or increase muscle mass, you would want to focus more on pea protein or hemp protein, hemp seed protein, or chia seed protein. All of these are much better sources. Now, know that when you're using these proteins, you're not getting a ton of phytonutrients, but you are getting a good source of protein. You can also use beans as a good source of protein, but these powder forms get digested somewhat better than potentially other sources of plant-based. And it's harder to digest sometimes certain foods, whereas powders tend to get absorbed even better. But I'm not suggesting that you go out and have pea protein. I'm suggesting that you get it from whole foods directly, and you'll get the most results.
Right. Nancy, do we have any more questions on protein?
We do. We have, this one ties not from protein, because I know we have another agenda question, but we have one more question. In the lipid profile, what is the protein level range that is most healthy? Because the lipids are your cholesterol and your fats. That's not your protein. So I think
I'm confused by the question. You're trying to. The question's tying two things together.
Right. Let's separate them and say what is the healthy range on your blood profile for protein. Do we know that off the top of your head?
The amount in your body is usually between like 6.1, 6.2 up to about 7.5 to 8. It depends on the lab.
Right.
But we never find, in the United States, people who are deficient in protein. We never find people who are deficient in protein. And I always find that to be interesting. And we find that people on the lower half of the protein tend to protect their kidneys more. But there's no research to point to that and say, but I find that in my practice, I find that it goes sometimes on the lower half, but it's not a big deal. You don't really know what the number is. But in terms of the cholesterol, and I think you bring up a very good point, where should we be on the cholesterol? And as far as cholesterol goes, well, when we look at animal protein, there's a lot of fat. I mean, it doesn't matter what animal protein you're looking at. I mean, when you're looking at, say, for instance, let's use an example. The amount of fat, we shouldn't drink full fat milk. Right? We're always told to drink skim milk or 1% milk if we drink milk at all. Okay. Now we say let's have lean chicken. Lean chicken tends to be about 86% fat-free. And we say that's great. That gives us 14% fat, but not the rest. So, but then when you look at milk and you say whole milk is 96% fat-free. So chicken
Wait a minute. 96% fat-free?
Yes.
Whole milk?
Yes. It's only based on, milk is based on 0, 1, 2, 3. Well, no 3. We've never seen 3. I don't know what happened to 3.
But that's not based on fat per calories.
No, it's based on percent of fat in the actual milk itself when you're skimming it off. So it's not based on calorie. It's based on percent.
Okay.
So percent, though, comes out to calorie eventually, because then when you put it in the carton, it comes out to calorie. It comes out to daily consumption of fat. Right.
Okay. Anyway.
But to go back to it.
Yeah.
So there's 0, 1, 2, and 4%. I don't know what happened to 3% fat-free milk, because I'm number 3 in terms of birth, and I'm really hurt at the fact that they skipped over me. So I don't exist. But then again, for milk, I don't exist anyway. But what I'm saying is that lean chicken, has 3.5 times the amount of saturated fat as whole milk. Or if you look at lean turkey, where you can get like 92, 93% lean turkey, you find that it still has 70% saturated fat. And then if you go to the 99% fat-free turkey, you end up with cardboard, because it tastes like cardboard. Now, when you talk about animal proteins, there are degradations of different type of animal proteins. So if you're going to eat animal protein, there are better ones to eat and not so good ones to eat. I mean, overall, it's best to reduce the amount of animal protein to very little, to almost nothing or none. And so, to 0. It's best to bring it down to almost none to 0. Right. And bringing it down to that level is the best. But if you're going to eat animal protein, because not everybody's going to give up animal protein, then you want to stay away from processed meats. Processed meats are the number 1 worst.
Lunch meats. Oh.
Lunch meats, the ones we ate growing up. The ones we ate all the time growing up. We don't want to eat those.
The salami?
The salami.
Fat. Oh, my God.
Right. But they can also get rid of fat in the processed meats, because I don't know what they do to processed meats. I don't know how it works.
I don't want to know.
Well, it's interesting that, the World Health Organization now has considered them a class 1 carcinogen.
Correct.
Just like smoking. So,
correct.
I don't think I would give my children a sandwich of cigarette butts.
Well, you could light up a turkey breast that was processed, roll it up and smoke it, and see how that really burned. I don't know what would happen, but I wouldn't recommend it. No, I wouldn't recommend it.
All right.
But then when you look at it, if you want to look at the list, if you're interested in hearing about it, are you interested in hearing about the list of just how it would go down or not? Or would you rather just focus on?
Let's focus on plant-based proteins.
Fine. Yeah. Let's focus on plant-based.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. I think we've kind of hit that. Unless there's any other questions, Nancy, for protein.
Nope, we're good. We're good on protein.
Also, there's one that's huge, and I don't want to let it go.
Okay, go.
And it happens in men more than women, but it happens a lot in men and women, and it's painful. What happens is, remember I said when you eat animal protein, you cause calcium to be pulled out of the bone, which is osteoporosis. But more important, and that takes years and years and years, and you don't know how long that's going to take, or you don't know if you're going to end up with it. But what you do find is you have an increased risk of something called a kidney stone. And that's where it is so painful. And it blocks the ureter of the kidney that you feel like you can't sit still and you are in extreme pain. And all they can do is give you fluids and give you pain medication and go, okay. And then we give you lithotripsy, which is ultrasound or sound to break up the particle, but it is so painful. Anyone who's had a kidney stone would realize, and when I look at patients, the interesting thing is when I look at patients' urine, you see calcium oxalate in the urine sometimes.
Crystals. Crystal.
Right, the crystals. The crystals, exactly. You see that more and more commonly. And I tell patients, if you keep going the way you're going to see a calcium oxalate stone. And that's what it's made up of, calcium oxalate. So when you see those crystals, those are the precursor to saying, holy crap, I hope you don't get a kidney stone. But the other thing about it, and that brings up another point, is that the kidneys should never dump protein into the urine.
Right.
And when you dump protein into the urine, called proteinuria, it's showing that the kidney function is going to come down and going to decline, and you're going to lose the functioning of your kidneys eventually. And so what you need to do to get rid of that, the number one way to get rid of proteinuria is to reduce animal protein. And why is it animal protein? Because both animal protein and plant protein have nitrogenous waste. So you say, well, shouldn't they be equal on the kidneys? But they're not, because phosphorus is poisonous in the amount that comes from animal protein. And that's the hypothesis of why you end up with proteinuria or protein in the urine. And I see it all the time.
That is one of the reasons why if you go to any box, pharmacy, store, you're going to see a whole aisle. And I've been watching this aisle grow. It's adult diapers. And if you go into any box store, it started out with a little section. Now it's a whole aisle.
Of Depends.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's also
adult diapers.
Yeah, they're terrible. But another thing, Dr. Danaev, is that I have seen through my group and network of friends is that a couple family members and friends have had bariatric bypass surgery, or the new term called the sleeve. But then over time, because of the tremendous amount of whey protein drinks that they're required to drink, they've developed kidney stones.
Right. And you know, everybody, and the funny thing is, everybody worries with the kidney stones about things like spinach because it has oxalates. Theoretically, it could increase the risk of kidney stones, but it really doesn't. A lot of the research doesn't pan out to show that it does. And so oxalates are also an animal protein. But it seems to work that way. It's kind of like heme iron comes from animals and has an effect, and non-heme iron comes from plants and doesn't have that effect on increasing too much iron, so you get this increased risk of cardiovascular disease and things like that. The
non-heme also helps to regulate.
Yeah, non-heme is a good thing. Non-heme doesn't get absorbed readily, and so spinach has a ton of iron. When you think of Popeye, you think of spinach. Ton of spinach percentage-wise. But how much really gets absorbed when you eat a ton?
Right, because the non-heme is regulating that.
Right. The non-heme gets excreted, the body can control it. But if you have heme iron, the body gets overridden. And so if you have anemia, heme iron can be valuable. But barring anemia, it may not be of value. And especially in postmenopausal women and in men. So postmenopausal women and men tend not to be able to dump iron.
Okay, I just wanted to let you know that we have a question.
Oh, I'm so excited.
I know. Can kidney stones contribute to or cause incontinence?
Kidney stone, I don't know of any research that relates to kidney stones causing incontinence. So I wouldn't say that a kidney stone would cause incontinence. The causes of incontinence can be related to muscular, can be related to bladder control. More likely, incontinence comes from bladder, not kidney. And it's around muscle control. And that's usually what relates to it. But it could also be neurogenic, where it relates to nerves. So it's a really good question. And we connect the two because the kidneys are connected to the bladder. It almost sounds like a song, doesn't it? The kidneys are connected to the bladder.
Da, 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 da. Yeah, we got it.
All right. So, but they're connected because, you know, you have the ureters that go right into the bladder. But it's the bladder itself that's the holding tank. And that's what happens. The holding tank usually has problems, and that's what causes the incontinence.
My mom also found before she had passed away, that her incontinence was also hormone related.
Right. Well, hormone related, but it all affects the muscle in some way, and the nerves. The muscle and the nerves are basically the end product of what's affected, and then you end up with incontinence. Whether you end up with the uterus prolapsing, those type of things where you have prolapses or things like that, they put pressure on the bladder. And again, that's about the muscles and the nerves. It all comes out to the muscles and the nerves.
Okay.
Like what one of our viewers, Kathy, says, ladies, do your Kegels.
Okay.
Kegels.
Alrighty.
Kegels.
Yes, Kegels.
Kegels.
Kegels. Kegels. Kegels are good for men too.
Like Beagle. They are. That's fantastic.
They're good for men too. They're not, it's great for both.
Excellent. Good to know.
All right.
All right,
So are we ready to get on to our questions? Because we got some really good questions.
These were great questions that people asked. I thought they were wonderful questions.
No, but these are the ones we got sent in ahead of time. So connect with Nancy or I, and we're collecting questions. So we're going to have Dr. Deneve back in June. And we've got another doctor, Dr. Karen Ramscheid, who's going to be coming on at some point in the future.
So she's in Germany, but when she gets back and gets settled back, then we'll have Dr. Karen Ramscheid, and she's excited to also be part of our doctor series. So we're very appreciative.
Yay. All right. So question 1, Marilyn Liquore got this sent to her. She got an email and she sent it to me, and she's like, I got to know, is there any truth to this, this research? And can you shed some light on this? And the email said that kale is a neurotoxin that can actually absorb too much of the heavy metal called thallium out of the ground. And she wants to know, what are your thoughts about this? That there was a doctor who was showing this, and I had heard now all of a sudden it's like, oh God, we can't eat kale because it's toxic. Take it away.
Yeah, kale's toxic. Don't eat it. I mean, that's a really bad thing to eat. Kale could actually cause too many people to survive. And then we have overpopulation. And then if we have overpopulation, then we have toxins from too many humans.
Oh,
no,
stop it.
absolutely. Kale is wonderful. Kale has so many valuable nutrients and phytonutrients and anti-inflammatory effect. So oxygen radical absorption capacity, say that 10 times faster or
Gesundheit.
Right, exactly. Right. And so it's really valuable. And so to not eat kale would be a shame. I mean, it has fiber, it has protein, it has so many
antioxidants, phytonutrients.
Right. And
folate.
To go back to folate, to go back to vitamin A, a lot of carotenoids. I mean, we could go on forever. We could keep listing them, and we could put everybody to sleep. And if you have trouble sleeping, you could just list the amount of things kale has. Forget the lamb, because that's animal protein. You want to talk about the kale when you're sleeping and count the amount of nutrients. That was a bad joke. I'm sorry.
Really bad. Oh, wow.
I'm sorry.
Okay. So what's the issue with the thallium?
It was a whole food plant-based joke.
I liked it.
I did too. If I like it, it's good enough for me. If you make yourself laugh, that's all that matters. All right, about the thallium. Thallium is a heavy metal, and it's found mostly in rat poison and insecticides.
Yeah.
And there was a case that was found that someone who had kale had increased thallium in their urine, and the toxicity was high potentially. But they don't even know whether it was actually due to the kale or due to something else. And there was one case, and that's the only research we're going on to talk about the thallium. So let me give you an analogy. For the longest time, and this is still going on in conventional medicine, this is the only time conventional medicine tends to use, and I'm exaggerating, but this is the time that conventional medicine likes to use plant-based sources and put it at the forefront when there's conflict with it, as opposed to when it's beneficial in reversing disease. There are plenty of physicians who believe in whole foods plant-based diet, but there are also those who skeptics of it, and they like to put in the forefront the ones that don't go well. Well, here's the one that doesn't go well. There was a case of a woman who had, we keep saying that everybody who has hypothyroidism should not, or low functioning thyroid, should not have cruciferous vegetables. And that includes kale and broccoli and cabbage and cauliflower, but also bok choy. And it's all based on one patient who ate 3 pounds of raw bok choy a day. Now, I couldn't even imagine eating 3 pounds. Bok choy is one of my favorite vegetables, but 3 pounds of raw, that's a lot. And all they ate was that.
That's like,
and so, right, that's like
That's
this
like a
week,
huge amount
every week, my wife and I get about 4 pounds of bok choy for the week.
for the week.
For the two of us.
Love bok choy.
I love bok choy. My brother calls me bok choy boy. He doesn't necessarily know what bok choy is, but he calls me bok choy boy.
Okay.
It's a
Better humor?
superfood.
Okay, it's a superfood, right? Whatever that means. Anyway, so they said that it caused mixed edema coma, or a coma brought on by low functioning thyroid. And it turns out it wasn't even to blame. The bok choy wasn't even to blame. So it was one case and it wasn't even to blame. So now when patients have hypothyroidism or low functioning, they're told by some of their doctors, not all of them, and the ones who are in the know tell them this is a bogus, this is a myth. Let's debunk this myth. But they're told not to eat cruciferous vegetables because their thyroid is low. And that actually isn't the case. Cruciferous vegetables don't have a negative impact. There's been no research showing that. And that's the same with thallium and kale. There's really no research on it. So let's all stop eating one of the most wonderful foods because one person might have, which may not have been related. There may have been 17,000 co-founders in that research. And so, in other words, let me give you an example. When you have smoking, New York City did this study on smoking, and it was hysterical because what they found was that ashtrays cause lung cancer. So they thought ashtrays cause lung cancer. So what did they do? They banned ashtrays before they banned smoking.
Okay, that works.
Okay.
Right, because ashtrays didn't cause lung cancer, the smoking caused lung cancer. So it was a confounding factor. So you don't know all the different confounding factors.
Right.
So that's what I'm saying. So let's put that to rest.
So, okay, but I mean, if you were concerned if you eat a lot of kale, and I eat a lot of kale, I mean, no question, every day I have kale in one form or another, usually.
Yes, you can test in your urine.
Boom. There you go. If you're concerned,
you can test for heavy metals.
There you go.
And almost everybody I test for heavy metals, unless they live in a house with lead paint or unless they work in a factory that has organic solvents or unless they work with paints or things like that, almost never come back with heavy metals. Some do, but very, very few. Now, if you eat a lot of sushi and you have a lot of fish, and the 5 fish that have the most or the 4 fish that have the most, I always tell people are tuna, mackerel, swordfish, and bluefish. Then, and you have it every day, you come back sometimes with heavy mercury amounts.
Yeah. Mercury's nasty stuff.
And mercury's nasty stuff. It causes fatigue, hair loss, problems with your kidneys.
One of our viewers says, Jennifer Abernathy says, this is good to know regarding cruciferous veggies. I was told not to eat them, but I still do. Yay. I am one of those too, Dr. Danaeff. I had hypothyroidism, but when I adopted my plant-based lifestyle, about 3.5, 4 years in, my thyroid leveled off and I haven't taken any levothyroxine for a couple years now. Just had all my annual panels done and I was right in the normal range. And I like Jeanne, I eat kale, broccoli, bok choy, every cruciferous vegetable there is, they're my favorite. And I have a completely normal thyroid.
That's great. That's absolutely wonderful.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a telltale sign.
Plants. Yep.
And I see it in my clinical practice too. I mean, it's not, I have people who have hypothyroidism and I give them cruciferous and their functioning doesn't get worse. That doesn't mean go against discussion with your doctor. I mean, you still want to be careful and you want to have this discussion with them. What I'm doing is not saying medical advice and overriding your doctor. You should be having discussion. Always have discussion with your doctor before changing anything.
Absolutely.
Great question.
It was a great question. Absolutely. We got another question from our Starch Queen member, Teresa Adams. She says, how can diet help with a sluggish small intestine?
Okay, so sluggish small intestine, I think I know what that means, but I'm not sure because we don't really use that terminology
I was going to say, I've not
medicine.
I've
not heard that before.
Yeah.
But I'm going to go with the idea that it's related to constipation. I'm going to relate to the transit time is slow, and that's usually related to constipation. And that can be related to other things like gastroparesis, which is slow down time which relates usually to diabetes, patients with diabetes and so on. But we're going to go with the simpler form so we don't blow people's mind into terms that they have no idea what that means. So let's say it's constipation. And we all know what constipation means. Okay. Yeah, we all know what constipation means, whether it means physically constipated or personality constipated.
Oh,
we all know it. We all know it. And Jeanne is demonstrating. I'm not sure which, but one of them.
Thank you.
You're welcome. That's to get back at you for my humor and saying that I had a bad sense of humor, because Nancy actually enjoyed the previous one.
I think did. You're Starch Queen. You're a Starch Queen.
Right.
You're
right.
in.
But 2 out of 3 ain't bad. Anyway, so as far as that goes, you want to get plenty of fiber. And plenty of fiber means it doesn't matter whether it's just soluble or insoluble. You want to get a combination. Forget about that. What you want to do is you want to get plenty of whole foods, plant-based fiber. So that means you want to get plenty of roughage, and that comes from fruits and vegetables. You want to get plenty of beans, some grains, some whole grains. That's all wonderful. But the caveat to that is, and I'm about to sneeze, so I apologize. And I'm not sure if it's coming or if it's not, but it's on its way. I'm allergic to Jeanne. I'm allergic to Jeanne through the video.
I'm going to say to my kids, sneeze into your shirt. I make them pull up their shirt and sneeze right into it.
It's not coming.
It's allergy season.
I thought it was. I don't have the allergies. I don't suffer from that. That's great. And that's one of the things that the plant-based really helps with inflammation. So anyway, in terms of what we do, a lot of fiber is great, but if you overdo fiber right away, you're going to get gas and bloating. And if you use psyllium husk, which is what most of the fiber that's added fiber, if you use a lot of that, you're going to get a lot of gas and bloating. So if you use it, do it very gradually. Increase your fiber amount very gradually, or you're going to notice gas and bloating, and you're going to hate all 3 of us. And you're going to hate everybody else too, because everybody else is going to leave the room. Ba-boom! And it hurts. And it hurts, and it's not fun.
I call it the Hindenburg.
Right.
It's so uncomfortable. One quick question. Can you have too much fiber? Can you have intestinal fiber overload? Is there such a thing?
I've never heard such a thing.
Yeah.
I've never heard such a thing. Now, let me just give an example very, very quickly of how much fiber we get and how much we should get. We get about 15 grams of fiber, or 8 to 15, depends on which source you use, 8 to 15 grams of fiber a day. We should be getting 25, 28 for women and 40 for men. I don't know why they say less for women, so I say it should be at least that for women. It should be equal rights. They should get equal fiber, equal opportunity, equal health benefits.
Yep, I think that's great. Speaking of my mom, she did follow a standard American diet, and her health was poor, so her diet was poor, and she suffered terribly from constipation. It's very debilitating. It's very painful.
Right.
We do have a question. It is with regards to your sneeze, not about constipation. It's from one of our Starch Queen members, Treva McDaniel. She wants to know how you feel about allergy shots. And
allergy shots.
I'm going to say most likely the desensitizing,
desensitization. Shots. I think allergy shots are fine. I mean, there are micro amounts of particles that you're allergic to, and I think they're great. And I think that what they do is they build up your immune system to help you with that. And so I think it brings you back. So if you can't eat peanuts, there have been peanut allergies where they've been able to bring people back to be able to eat certain foods that they couldn't eat before. So taking micro amounts, taking really, really small amounts and giving them back can really do things. And you can do it with cats, and you can do it with dogs. So if you really love cats and dogs, which Jeanne does and I do, and Nancy, I don't know your position. Okay, so you do too. So, but that's really wonderful. So you don't have to avoid them.
Okay.
Good. Yeah, I went through rounds and rounds and rounds and rounds.
That's fine. That's great.
I was a teenager, and I was a pretty significant cat allergy, and cats don't bother me anymore. So that, and along with changing my food, I no longer take any allergy medication. It's amazing. So
that's great. That's great. That's what I've seen with many, many of my patients.
Okay. Good. We got another question. Susan Davis says, or asks, I've heard that a plant-based diet will help us live longer I read it has something to do with the telomeres and cell division. Would you explain this?
Telomeres. They're pronounced telomeres. And that's just picking on you because you picked on my joke. And so, I'm going to give it back to you.
Going down.
Okay, I've heard telomeres. Okay, I taught biology for years.
Okay.
Okay, fine.
Well, whichever one.
I call them Teletubbies. We got a PhD. I'm in the middle here. We have a PhD, an accountant, and an MD. And when I was reading the book and reading about Teletubbies, I'm like, telomere. Isn't that a cat? Isn't that like an African tele? So
yeah. Like, all right.
I call them Teletubbies.
Fine. I just want to, we'll say orange or pecan or pecan or whatever,
Tomato,
and
tomato.
Right. Well,
Almond.
my mother-in-law says you pee in a can and you eat pecans, and she's from the South. That's
there
the
you
difference.
go. The question.
You say almond, you say almond.
Let's get
Yes. Okay. So as far as telomeres go, telomere length is very important, and telomeres are found at the end of chromosomes, and they're like the shoelaces. They keep them from unraveling, and as soon as the telomere length gets too short, they unravel and they die. Right. Basically, the cells die, and so you don't want your telomeres to get too short. The longer they go, the better you do. You want longer telomeres. And how do you do that? By lifestyle changes a lot of times. But can we measure the telomeres? No, we can't. Well, we can in a lab, but they're not very accurate. Only in a research lab and only a few across the country. So don't get caught up in this idea that I can go to a lab and they have this special kit and they can measure my telomeres. That you can't. You can't right now. So it's really an interesting theory, but you can't measure it. But what happens is, when they get too short, they either die or they don't die, and worse, you get cancer, where they divide. Cancer cells have very short telomeres, but long enough to keep the cells alive to rapidly divide. So what you want to do is you want to change your lifestyle, and there's some research that says reducing amount of calories, but then again, that may be related to the standard American diet. And here's one that I really love. What's the difference between a whole foods plant-based diet and the standard American diet? Anyone?
Processed foods?
No. One of the core differences. No. Here's the core difference. The core difference between a whole food plant-based diet and
we're listening,
and a standard American diet is that standard American diet is based on calories. The whole foods plant-based diet is based on nutrients.
Great.
So wait. Then this next step to it is to do well on a standard American diet. It's about calorie restriction. How few calories you can eat, because the poison you're putting in your body, you want to reduce because you want your body to overcome that poison so you have less of it. So on the other side is the whole foods plant-based diet with nutrients. So it's about how much volume you can eat. The more volume you have, the more nutrients you're getting. Now, barring some, you don't want to overdo it with nuts and seeds and some things like that. But with fruits and vegetables, it's go to it galore. And when I say vegetables, I'm also saying not starchy vegetables, because if you go too far with starchy vegetables, they can play a role too. It depends on what your thinking is, but that can play a role too. So you want to be careful. But it's really about volume, the whole foods plant-based diet. Whereas a SAD diet is sad because you try to restrict how much you're eating, because if you eat too much, you're poisoning yourself. Yeah. Calorie restriction. And that's where you see telomeres grow when you restrict calories with a standard American diet.
Wow.
Good point.
Very good.
Score one for the doctor. Right? You scored one. Yeah, you scored one.
I think that was more like a 3-pointer than a 1, but okay.
That
was not just a foul shot.
Oh,
okay.
We've got Dr. Let's see, what's his name? LeBron, Dr. LeBron.
Yeah, Dr. LeBron. Yeah, that's me. I'm all dribble.
No, I'm not. Set yourself up for that one. Okay. All right. Okay. Last question. Teresa D asked and sent in, I've heard mushrooms are really, really healthy, but yet they're a fungus. And funguses can contain toxins. So what should we do? Should we eat mushrooms or not?
Okay, so every food has some toxins in it, no matter what food it happens to be. Mushrooms have toxins, but there are thousands of different variety of mushrooms, and only about 10 to 25 of them are toxic in terms of mortality or death. So you really don't have to worry, because we don't find those unless you go hunting through the woods. So you'd really have to find them. Don't really worry about toxins with mushrooms because they're so valuable. They're great medicinally. They have such a powerful effect. And the ones you find in the grocery store are not going to be the toxic ones, because if they were, the grocery store would be out of business very quickly. Yes. And if you want to get rid of toxins and you're afraid of toxins, then always cook mushrooms. But does it mean you can't eat raw mushrooms? No, you can still eat raw mushrooms if you want. But if you want to reduce the toxins to almost nothing, cook them.
Dr. Furman recommends that you cook them as
Correct.
well.
Correct.
So
I love some mushrooms raw, but cooked mushrooms are great. So either way, I mean, you're going to get benefit from it. And there's so many different nutrients.
They have cordyceps, and cordyceps are, what I'm learning about, a very healthy component of mushrooms.
Right. There's so many components to mushrooms, and actually the Japanese mushrooms or the Asian mushrooms are the ones that have the most power. Shiitake, cremini, all of those are wonderful. So if you can get those, they have great abilities and help with cancer too. So you really want to eat mushrooms. And if you feel more comfortable, eat them cooked. I eat mostly cooked.
So the raw ones do have toxins in them?
Well, all mushrooms have a little bit of toxins, but what they do.
Does the cooking then release the toxins out?
Yes. You can get rid of the toxins from doing some of the cooking.
Good to know.
Mm-hmm.
And my mother-in-law, she's Seventh-day Adventist, so she's actually part of the Blue Zone. She's followed this way of eating for as long as I've known her, 33 years. She always said, Nancy, it's best to cook your mushrooms to get the nutrients and those little toxins out of there. And so I just listen to Mom.
Well, the great thing about Seventh-day Adventists, there have been trials on them, and they show that they can live 10, 12 years longer than the rest of the population. And they have comparisons with, going back to animal protein, just to go back to animal protein for a second, there's a comparison in what's called the Adventist Health Study 2, where it compares animal protein to not having animal protein, to having lacto-ovo, to having pescatarian. And what it shows is that the people who do the best tend to be the ones who have the least amount of animal protein. And these are comparing people who eat healthy with the meat and people who eat healthy without the meat. A lot of times when we compare meat to non-meat, we compare non-healthy with many different things to healthier. So we don't necessarily know all the components, but at least with the Adventists, you see that there's a difference and there's fewer confounding factors. So you see that the meat plays a role.
Okay. We're done with the questions, and you're going to talk about the latest research, which is the effect of water on kidney function. So share this. I found this fascinating.
Okay. So the latest research, we're always told that water is a great hydrator. And we're always told to drink 8 glasses of water. And where did that come from? Do you know, Nancy?
Probably Weight Watchers.
I don't know. I'm asking the question because I don't actually know. It's a myth. It's an urban myth of 8 glasses a day because, I mean, it really depends on your hydration. And I've tried 8 glasses a day, and I've ended up having to run to the bathroom immediately and then have to pull the car over and run to the bathroom again. And it was just like herky-jerky. And I was like, oh, my God, I tried this for a month. And I was like, I have to spend more time in the bathroom than I do, and it was. But anyway, as far as water goes, it's not the great hydrator. It's important, but it's not the great hydrator. It affects you in terms of overdoing water because you can reduce your sodium levels in your blood by having too much water. So you can cause dangerous problems by having what's called hyponatremia or low sodium. But so there was a study done just recently, and this is really wild. And I've been saying this for the longest time. And we were talking about chronic kidney disease at the beginning. Let's end with chronic kidney disease. And that is that chronic kidney disease, to bring the GFR up, the functioning of the kidney, we give water. And there was a study done where they gave between half a liter to a liter and a half to patients in the treatment group. And in the control group, they told them not to drink any more water and see what happens. And there was a difference basically at the end of the study of 0.6 liters, or basically half a liter of water, which is about 16 ounces of water. And what they found was there was absolutely no difference in kidney function in those that drank more water than those that didn't. So
Wow.
water isn't the great hydrator that we think. It's a form of hydration, and it doesn't mean don't drink water. Water is very important. Don't over drink water, but don't think water is the great hydrator. Foods with fluids are much better. And what are foods with fluids?
Watermelon.
Watermelon.
Right, but any fruits and vegetables have fluids, and they're great hydrators. And they can actually bring back, and I see this all the time in my practice, is bringing back people who have chronic kidney disease to have normal functioning kidneys.
Well, that's
and
what
that comes from
Walter,
fruits and vegetables.
Yeah, Walter Kempner did that with the rice diet at Duke University.
Yes, many years ago, he did
Yeah.
that based on blood pressure and kidney function. And he used white rice, he used fruits. And really, it was getting rid of those processed meats, but getting rid of the animal protein. But also, which puts a lot of stress on the GFR. But what brings it back up mainly is the hydration from fluids that are not just water, because our body's not made up of water. We're made up of normal saline, half normal saline. When you go to the hospital, they don't just give you water. They give you electrolytes in water. And it happens to be water is the base for it, but it's not just pure water, because it would kill us.
Right.
Yeah. Wow. Well, do we have time for one more question? It's actually a question that goes back to when you were talking a little bit about the starches and if you have more starch, what is your position on a starch-based diet compared to or equal to Dr. McDougall's?
Okay,
Do
so
you have an opinion on starch?
Yes, I have an opinion on starch. I know I don't like Starch Queens. I'm just kidding. That was just thrown out there. It was just thrown out there to get a reaction.
We have our own heckler as
the inside heckler.
Inside heckler.
I'm just teasing. But no, as far as starch goes,
drink water.
In all seriousness, as far as starch goes, and you see, I have water here too. So I think water is very important.
Cheers.
Right. Cheers. As far as starches go, I think that what I find with my practice and what I find with a lot of the research is that starch is an important component. But as far as starch goes, I find that starch tends to be, if there were 3 levels in terms of how you did, there would be the whole foods plant-based diet using fruits and vegetables and some starches. Then there would be the McDougall type approach, and then there would be the standard American diet. And here's what I mean by that. One's going forward, one's going into neutral, and one's going in reverse. The reverse is a standard American diet. The neutral is the all-starch diet, where it's 90% starches, 75 to 90% starches, because it doesn't hurt you necessarily, but it doesn't necessarily help you. To help your body and accelerate with healing, the inflammation goes down with plants that are green, dark leafy greens and with fruits, but it doesn't go down. And I've noticed this many times with the labs and looking at inflammatory factors. It doesn't go down with the starches. So that doesn't mean the starches are bad. The starches add components. They add fiber, which, remember, I said fiber was great for treating and preventing colorectal cancer. Fiber is great for satiety. So does fruit and vegetables have fiber. So there's a lot of good things grains have or starches have that we need, but it doesn't reduce inflammation. The body reduces inflammation when you're having a grain-based or starch-based diet. Whereas with plant-based, it accelerates that reduction in inflammation.
Well, that's one of the things we talk about. We talk about always starting your meal with leafy greens and then getting filled up on that and then go to your carbohydrates.
Right, and that's the way I would think about it. Now, what I found that's interesting and may work is that McDougall's diet may be really beneficial for kids. because it gives you protein and it gives you fiber and it gives you a lot of what you need. And it gives you, he says, use about 10, 15% vegetables. But kids tend to say, I hate vegetables. And the reason for that partially is because we start them off and we go, oh, try some candy. And now you've lost the taste for something that's not ultra uber sweet. Candy's like medicine. You now take a mega dose of sugar and you put it in something and it's going to let it out, because fruit has sugar, but it doesn't have mega doses of sugar. So it can't compete. But I've found, and I think this would be a very, very interesting study, to use the McDougall diet with kids. And when I say kids, I mean someone under the age of about 21 or so, 21 or younger or so. And I mean pediatric patients. I don't just mean kids. And 21 are not kids. But under a certain age, when they say they don't like vegetables, using grains and starchy vegetables would, I think, get them much better results than what they're doing now. And it would give the sweetness, because starchy vegetables have tons of sweetness and grains have a lot of sugar. When you eat them, you tend to get a lot of sugar from it. So I think it would be a great idea for pediatric patients who don't like vegetables, and then give 10 to 15% vegetables. So when kids go, well, I don't want my vegetables, well, okay, have a little bit of vegetables and you can have mostly whole grains. Right, you can have mostly whole grains, and you can have pancakes, and you can have, I mean, we make banana pancakes. But what we do with banana pancakes is it's made up of 4 mashed bananas. So we make it into a liquid, and then we put in a whole grain that we use, a multigrain that's, you know, Arrow Mills or as high as you can get in terms of a multigrain, and we put it in there, but we put half as much or a third as much because we're covering it with bananas. So we get total sweetness with the pancakes, and then we don't get necessarily that insulin spike that you get sometimes after you eat grains. That can make you, right, that can make you tired. You even get sometimes insulin spikes with whole grains if you overdo it. It's the amount you're doing.
Yeah.
Well, I think that wraps up everything tonight. I think this was an amazing show.
Thank you so much, Dr. Danae, for joining the Starch Queens. We are very appreciative for joining our Talking Tuesdays. Thank you.
Well, you're welcome, and thank you for being such a good sport, and for teasing me and letting me tease you, Jeanne, for giving such great questions, Nancy. This crowd gave.
It's our viewers. You know, They're the best. They're always the best. And thank you, viewers, for joining us. We hope to see you next week on our Talking Tuesdays.
And send questions. If you have questions for the doctor series, we can put it into the next show. Or if you have questions, Nancy and I will be back next Tuesday.
Yep. So. Everybody have a fantastic evening.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Good night.
Good night, everybody. Night.
Good night, Billy Bob.
Night, night.